Hi, everyone. We're back, and now with an ex-Navy SEAL commander, Rich Diviney. He's been a Navy SEAL commander, or he was throughout his career for more than 20 years or so. Is that accurate, Rich?
That's correct, yeah.
Amazing. He's going to talk to us today and teach us all the real secret to being your best. It might not be as obvious as we all think. Rich has throughout his career done assessments of some of the highest performing military professionals. We'll talk a little bit about what he's learned. Take it away, Rich.
All right, thank you so much. Great to be here. Great to be partnered with Typeform. So I'm going to share my screen so I can show you some slides.
You share your screen. If people have any questions, remember there's a Q&A and a chat.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Like Vicky said, I am a former Navy SEAL. I spent 20 years in the SEAL teams. Went in 1996, retired just around 2017. So just over 20 years. I have been doing a lot of work and research on human performance and human potential, and the whole concept fascinates me. I don't consider myself an average guy. I was an average student growing up, and I was an average athlete. I was not homecoming king, and I was not also a kid who was pushed into lockers. I was just kind of so-so, and yet I was able to join an organization such as the SEAL teams that was really quite extraordinary. And when I got to SEAL training, I realized that SEAL training was designed specifically to bring us down to almost zero, take away as much as we could to see if we could still keep going. Those of you who may be familiar with this team SEAL training, it's run at San Diego, and typically your normal SEAL training candidates, our class starts with about 160 or so candidates, and usually 40 of them finish, between 35 and 40 finish, which is about an 80 to 85% attrition rate. So not many people make it through, and that was the case in my class back in the mid 90s. We started with about 160 and graduated 38. And I remember finishing that and looking around and feeling like I was just surrounded by superheroes, like superhuman people, and then begun to subsequently work with those people throughout my career. But one of the things I noticed quite immediately was that none of those guys thought that way about themselves. They all thought the same way I did. They all thought they were just normal dudes who happened to be able to get through some extraordinary training. And the reason was because we were able to pull things out of ourselves, some innate qualities that allowed us to persevere in stress, challenge, and uncertainty. And so the reason why I have the title of this presentation the way it is because we all have now gone through quite a rough year. 2020 has been rough for all of us, and the difference between 2020 and SEAL training is that none of us volunteered for SEAL training. None of us had an opportunity to quit or stop or drop. We all had to make it through, and in doing so, we all actually learned quite a bit about ourselves. I'm just going to start pulling up some slides here. What did we actually experience? We experienced a pandemic, right? Go back one. We experienced this pandemic, and we were all almost overnight thrown into a situation where we didn't know what to do. We didn't have any, quote, skills to pull us through the situation. We had to figure it out. We had to kind of figure out what am I going to do now? How am I going to manage? I'm quarantined. I can't go outside. I don't know if I have a job. Maybe I don't. Maybe I'm teaching my kids at school, or I'm teaching my kids at home. I was writing this book. I was in between writing books and teaching advanced algebra to my son. And so we all got thrown into this situation where there was no guidebook, there was no playbook for us. We didn't have any skills we could apply, and it took me back to when I worked with this concept as a Navy SEAL, and I ran training. At one point in my career, I was running training for a very specialized SEAL command, where we would take experienced SEALs and put them through our own assessment selection, and we'd still get about a 50% attrition. And in that process, the questions to me as the officer in charge were, hey, how can we best articulate the success and failure of candidates? And the metrics and the explanations we had up to that point weren't working because we were focused on performance skills. We were focused on things like shooting and skydiving and our ability to do these things. And that's when I really began to dig into, I and my team began to dig into what we call attributes. What are those innate qualities that allow us to push through, perform, persevere, all those things? So let me start by breaking down for you the difference between skills and attributes. Let's see here. So skills, okay. Skills are learned, okay? A skill is a learned thing. They're not inherent to our nature, which means we're taught them, okay? Riding a bike, driving a car, throwing a ball. Those are all things we're taught, and we can be taught. We can sit down, someone can teach us how to do them, and they direct our behavior in specific situations, right? They show us this is how you throw a ball. This is how you drive a car. This is how you ride a bike. In the military, it was shooting, it was scuba diving, it was skydiving. Okay, in business, it could be marketing or graphic design or things like that. Those are skills. Okay, as such, because they're skills, because they're easily seen and practiced, they're also easy to see, assess, and measure. You can tell, you can see how well someone does something like that. You can see how well someone throws a ball, does a graphic design, rides a bike, things like that. So skills are oftentimes they oftentimes seduce us into looking at the wrong things when we're assessing a team. The problem with looking at just skills is, while skills are really necessary and terrific for the job we do every day or whatever activity we're going into in a day, they are designed for known and certain situations, okay? You apply a skill to a known situation. Here's when you design graphics. Here's when you drive a car. Here's when you throw a ball, okay? They direct our behavior when the situation is known and certain. We know what's going on. We know what's supposed to happen. We apply a skill.
Sorry to interrupt. There's apparently a little issue with the slides. If we can try to reshare.
Okay.
Then, yeah, well.
Sure, did it stop sharing?
Some can be seen, but yeah, it stopped sharing for most.
All right.
Super fascinating, though.
Share again. All right, let me know if that pops through.
I think we are good, yes. And if you could push it to full screen, that should help.
Terrific.
So the little green button when
all right.
over.
All right, I think we're good. All right, so hopefully you can all see that. So that's what skills are. Okay, skills inform our behavior. They're easy to see, assess, and measure. However, when things become challenging, when things are uncertain and unknown, we can't necessarily apply a known skill, and that's where our attributes come in. All right, what are our attributes? Attributes, they're elemental. Okay, they're inherent to our nature. We're born with these things. Okay, we can actually see, you can see levels of adaptability and resilience and perseverance in small children. All right, so they're elemental to our behavior. They don't tell us what to do in specific situations. What they do is they inform our behavior. They tell us how we'll show up for specific and in specific situations. So my son's level of resilience, adaptability, and perseverance informed how he learned how to ride a bike. Okay, when he fell off a dozen times learning. Okay, it informs our behavior. Because of that, they're hard to see, assess, and measure and test, because they're hidden in the background. Okay, they're just informing behavior. They are the most visible. They are the most visceral when we are in uncertainty, challenge, and stress, which is exactly why SEAL training was such a great laboratory for me to discover this stuff and figure it out. Okay, because SEAL training, by its nature, was designed to put us all in challenge, uncertainty, and stress. Well, guess what 2020 did for us? 2020 dropped us directly into challenge, uncertainty, and stress. And so moving through 2020, we got to start to figure out and see how much adaptability we had, how much perseverance, how much resilience. So what we've done, and what we've done with the book here that's coming out in January, is break down the 25 attributes of optimal performance. What are those attributes that cause us to behave the way that we do, especially specifically when things are uncertain and stressful. So I'm going to go through those with you. I want to give you a quick look at those, and then tell you what we have on tap for everybody next with assessment tools and the great work we're doing with Typeform. All right. So first category of attributes is grit. What is grit? Grit is not just a singular thing. Grit is a combination of several things kind of blended and catalyzed. It's the loaf of bread that comes out of the oven after it's baked. Okay. The four attributes that I write about that cause and build and make up grits are these: courage, perseverance, adaptability, and resilience. So what is courage? It's the ability to manage fear in order to confront danger, difficulty, or pain. This is actually an attribute. Some of us are better at this than others. Some of us are able to step more effectively into fear, move through it. Some of us aren't as good at it. It can be developed, however. You can actually practice this. And in fact, neurologically, because of the way our brains and our physiology is designed, when we decide to step into fear, when we decide to fight, in kind of classic nomenclature, the fight response, we're stepping into what we're afraid to do, we get a hit of dopamine. Dopamine is a very powerful neurotransmitter that tells us when something is pleasurable. All right. Most of our addictive habits are addictive because they cause the release of dopamine. That's why they're addictive. Okay, dopamine is it's a powerful substance. It's a natural neurotransmitter that gives us a boost. Okay, and it's a tremendous boost. And that was designed physiologically and through evolution to allow us to continue to step into our fear. Okay, every time we take a step forward, it doesn't mean we've actually accomplished our goal. Every time we decide to step into our fear, we get that reward. Our body tells us, hey, this is good, keep going. Okay, that's by design, we can practice it. So it's an elemental piece of grit. Perseverance, the ability and the constancy in doing something difficult despite difficulty or delay. I keep on moving. I decide. I initiate persistence, tenacity, and fortitude. It's a combination of those three things. Adaptability. Can we adapt quickly and calmly to changing circumstances? As the environment changes around us, how easily do we adapt to that environment? For some of us, it's a little bit harder. For others, it's easier. That shows you where you are on your scale of adaptability. By the way, all of us have all of these attributes. The difference is how much of each we have. So that's where we're different as human beings. I may have a little bit more adaptability than someone else. Someone else may have a little bit more perseverance than I do. Okay, so it's on a scale. And we'll talk about how we can help you find out what yours are here at the end. And then, of course, resilience. How fast, how rapidly can we return to our mental and emotional baseline after a low and a high? Because when great things happen, we also need to return to baseline so we can be back thinking calmly and clearly. But certainly when we're low, how fast can we get back to our baseline? That's our levels of resilience. If you're someone who typically bounces back pretty quickly after a low or a high, you probably have a higher level of resilience. If it takes you a little bit longer, your levels of resilience may be a little bit low. So those are the four that make up grit. The next category is mental acuity. This really is basically how sharp our mind is and how our mind processes the external world. And these are all four of these are connected: situational awareness, compartmentalization, task switching, and learnability. All right. So situational awareness, how the ability to absorb information, how much are we taking in? Compartmentalization, as we take that in, how can we assess and prioritize what we need to prioritize? Pick what's necessary, so prioritize it, and then focus on what we need to focus on. Okay, that's compartmentalization, our ability to do that. Task switching is once we're focused in on something, if we need to shift tasks, how fast and efficiently can we do that? Okay, this is not microtasking, it's escaping me, but multitasking, right? Multitasking is a myth. Our brains literally only do one, maybe two things, but usually just one thing at a time, all right? So we're not actually multitasking, we're task switching, okay? So our ability to switch among tasks and contexts speaks to our level of task switching. And then learnability, how are we able to absorb and process and apply new information as it comes in, as all that's going on. Some of our levels are higher, some of our levels are lower. Admittedly, my level of learnability is a little bit lower than most. It takes me a little while to absorb and learn. I make the same mistakes a few times, right? So I know that about myself. So when I'm learning something, I try to go in a little bit more deeply. I spend a little bit more time. I repeat a little bit more often, right? Because I know my learnability is a little bit lower. We all know people who, as soon as they're shown or taught something, they pick it up immediately. Their learnability is high, all right? So that's mental acuity. So drive, what is it about someone's intrinsic nature and intrinsic motivations that allows them to succeed? Okay, 5 things: self-efficacy, a belief in one's ability to achieve a goal. All right, this is a combination of 3 factors: confidence, initiative, and optimism. Okay, those 3 things blended allow for self-efficacy. I know that I can do it. I have the initiative to start, and once I'm started, even though I don't know the outcome, I know I'll figure it out. The optimism to know that. Okay, so it's all 3. Discipline. How effectively can we look at a very long-term goal and move towards that goal through the lows and the highs? We don't get seduced into stopping by the highs. So those of us who have a bucket list that is largely checked off probably are higher on the level of discipline. Okay, if our bucket list for some reason is not checked off enough, or we find like we start something, we don't necessarily finish it, maybe our discipline's a little bit lower. Open-mindedness, that's pretty self-explanatory. A closed mind is not a driven mind. A closed mind is a certain mind, and whether it's right or wrong, that mind is not even curious enough to accept new ideas and move on. So open-mindedness is key. Cunning, a little bit pejorative in terms of a word, but the ability to look at problems and situations from an unorthodox perspective. All right, so see beyond the perceived rules. Okay, sometimes there are rules we have to follow, but the questions the cunning mind asks are, hey, what are the rules? Are they real or fake? If they are real, what happens if I break them? Okay, so I can see out. This is basically thinking outside the box. Okay, how often and how natural is that process? And then narcissism, definitely a pejorative word, but we have to understand that narcissism, while yes, a personality disorder on one end, it is an enormous human driver. Okay, we all have a desire at some level to stand out, to be noticed, to be recognized. Okay, this is biological. Okay, when we are noticed, even when we're infants being looked at lovingly by our parents, we are getting hits of serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin. Those 3 chemicals, 2 neurotransmitters, 1 hormone, are very powerful. It's a very powerful combination. We like that feeling. Okay, so we all, as humans, need to recognize that we all are narcissistic to a degree. Okay, certainly we don't want to go off the scale, and that narcissism, if effectively metabolized, actually can drive us to do things that we wouldn't otherwise do. It's one of the reasons why I became a Navy SEAL. Okay, I am deeply patriotic. I love my country. If you ask any Navy SEAL, though, if they're really honest to you, they'll say, I wanted to be a badass. Okay, yes, I'm patriotic. Yes, I love my country, and that will never change. But the drive came from a little bit of narcissism. So the idea is, let's be human, let's recognize it, and let's maximize its effectiveness without going too far. Leadership. What are the attributes that make up great leadership? Well, first and foremost, we have to recognize that leadership is not a self-designated position. Okay, we don't get to call ourselves leaders. All right, it's like calling yourself funny. Okay, if you're not making people laugh, you're not funny, right? Only others get to designate you a leader. They say, hey, that guy is a leader, that gal is a leader. Okay, we do this by behaving in a certain way. Leadership is a behavior, not a position. Okay, and these 5 things are things that allow the behavior of leadership, so someone can make a decision to say, yes, that is a person I choose to follow. Empathy, selflessness, authenticity, decisiveness, accountability. All right, fairly self-explanatory. And then finally, team ability. What are those attributes that make up a great teammate? Okay, because just like leadership, we're not allowed to call ourselves a great teammate either. All right, other people get to call us that, and that's a behavior as well. How do we behave in a way that allows our teammates to consider us great teammates? Okay, integrity, conscientiousness, humility, and humor. Okay, integrity, do the right thing according to the team. Okay, we have to recognize every team's definition of right and wrong is a little bit different. So integrity in terms of a team is defined by that definition for that team. Conscientiousness, hey, do you work hard? Are you diligent? Are you reliable? All 3 of those things. Humility, I think that's also pretty apparent. If we're not humble, the arrogance it doesn't empower, motivate, or inspire anybody, especially on a team. The self-awareness to say, hey, these are my weaknesses, but these are also my strengths, and share those with teammates so that they know when they can lean on you and they know when you're going to lean on them. That's humility. Okay, and then finally, humor, really fun one, because no high-performing team that I've ever experienced does not have its own class clown or many class clowns. Those people who just find the funny. Neurologically and biologically, when we laugh, which is an unconscious activity, right? We can't control it. We get flooded with dopamine, endorphins, and oxytocin, a very powerful combination of chemicals that makes us feel great. It actually helps hack into courage. because we're getting that dopamine hit. But that's why we feel better when we laugh. It's biological. All right. So those who can help us laugh, and if we can laugh during tough times, it's a hugely powerful factor. So that's a breakdown of all the attributes. I have a couple more I talk about in the book. I want to open it up for questions because I know I want to leave some time. So Vakis will help us. As this slide is up there, know that you can, on our website, so Typeform has partnered with us. We've generated an assessment tool, which we'd love to try out with you all. It's not fully live, but we can, if you go to the website, and I think if you scan this QR code, you can take the grit assessment and you can take the mental acuity assessment. It'll give you a report on where you stand based on 1,000 people. So this is where you stand, and it'll give you a report on some of the things you can do. We'd love for you to try that out, and we'll ask for some feedback. I think the next day you'll get an email for some feedback. So I'll pause there and answer any questions.
There is one question. Nadia Rabbit did not get all of the leadership bit. So could you repeat again the different attributes part of leadership?
Absolutely. So the 5 leadership attributes are empathy, selflessness. Okay, different than just different generosity or altruism. Selflessness means that you're taking a risk. You're actually, there's a cost to you helping another. You're putting yourself at risk. Okay, selflessness, authenticity. Again, we've all seen people who are inauthentic and we don't trust them, and we often don't call them leaders. Okay, decisiveness, the ability to make decisions quickly, and a key word is quickly. Okay. Someone can be a great decision maker. If they take a long, protracted time to make a decision, we know that doesn't imbue a lot of trust as a leader. So the ability to make them quickly and efficiently, and then accountability, be accountable for those decisions. Okay, we all get turned off by leaders who don't take accountability. We don't consider them leaders. I should say we all get turned off by people in charge who aren't accountable. We don't call them leaders. So those are the 5: empathy, selflessness, authenticity, decisiveness, and accountability.
Incredible. I'm going to hop to some Q&A. We have a question from Daniela Burbano who asks, when it comes to management, any recommendations on how to help people improve?
How to help people improve, right? Well, I would maintain. I think one of the things I've discovered as I wrote the book and I researched is that you need to probably have 2 or more of the drive attributes to have effective drive. Each of those attributes on their own are fairly inert. So the step 1, if someone is not especially driven, ask the question which of the attributes they're high on. Okay, and take a note. All right, because they can affect those and they can maximize those. And then if there are ones that they're low on, they need to take an active role in developing an attribute. We can all develop the attributes we're a little low on. The thing is, it can't be taught like another skill. You can't sit down. I can't sit down and teach Vakis patience. Okay, it's not going to work. He has to decide to say, I'm going to be more patient. I'm going to work on it myself. So to develop an attribute, it has to be self-directed. And oftentimes it has to be a deliberate, conscious choice to go up against a natural inclination. So if someone is not open-minded, for example, someone has to say, okay, I choose to be open-minded. I'm going to actively pursue open-mindedness and think through that process. That's how the development happens. We can't develop an attribute in someone else. Someone has to make that decision themselves.
In case anyone's curious, one of my downfalls is definitely impatience. So that was caught very well.
I'm sorry I can't help you, buddy.
Andrea Dominguez is asking, although you mentioned that you can develop attributes, it does still strike me as a bit rigid, as a bit of a rigid mindset, innate aspects versus growth mindset, where all can be learned and improved.
Okay, I agree with that, and I want to make sure I'm clear. You can definitely improve your attributes. You can definitely develop them. All I'm saying is that it takes a lot more work. Okay, it's because you have to do it. Oftentimes, the most effective environments to develop an attribute are environments of stress, challenge, and uncertainty. It takes a deliberate effort to put yourself into those situations and those environments that allow you to develop those attributes. But you're absolutely right. It is about growth mindset. You can grow and develop attributes. It's just much harder than learning a skill, because I can sit down and learn how to type within a couple of days, or as a former SEAL, I could teach every one of you how to shoot a pistol and hit a target. I'd teach every one of you within about 3 hours. You'd be shooting bullseyes every time. Okay, that's a skill that can be taught. Harder for me to sit down. I can't teach you, cunning. or something like that. So it has to be self-directed. So thank you for the question. I want to emphasize you can definitely develop. It's just harder, and it has to be self-directed.
Thanks for that. We have another question from Victor Hugo Morales Medrano, who asks 2 qualities that you would consider important in a person.
So, Victor, thank you for that question, because I want to make sure I also emphasize that we don't place any judgment on attributes, okay? Because we all show up with different palettes, right? So my levels of patience, as compared to Vakis's levels of impatience, doesn't matter, okay? We are who we are. So don't place judgment. That when you place importance on attributes, it's really going to only be in the context of your specific team or task, right? So each team, like so a SEAL team, the list of attributes required to be a great Navy SEAL is going to be different than the list of attributes required to be a great team of nurses. So for example, whereas cunning is really one of the most valuable assets for a Navy SEAL, empathy is not, okay? You don't have to be very high on the empathy scale. You need some, I think, to be a good person, but you don't need to be very high. Whereas in a team of nurses, empathy is very important, okay? Cunning is not as important, okay? So the value judgments come when you start looking at them in the context of a team, not an individual. Hopefully that makes sense.
Perfect. I am going to ask you a last question, and then we will hop to the next speaker. How do we reduce our narcissistic tendencies and develop more strong skills like humility?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing, first of all, it's hard for us to see our own narcissism, okay? It's just like a vampire looking in the mirror. The only way that we can see them effectively is to build trusted, loving relationships with other people who can help us see those blind spots, okay? So number 1, lean on those you love and trust to tell you if you're a little bit out ahead of your or over your skis on narcissism, okay? My wife does this for me all the time, okay? So lean on those. And then if you are, just make an active decision to think of yourself in a humble way. Humility, I think, is very easily defined. It's that mastery is a journey, not a destination. I mean, if you even in those skills that you are very, very good at and have mastered, if you approach those by saying, "Hey, I can always learn something. I always want to learn something," even with what you've mastered, there's humility right there. It really is. Seeing, it's the difference between confidence and arrogance. Confidence is being confident in what you have and your abilities. Arrogance is thinking you're better than someone else, as is narcissism. Okay, narcissism is thinking you're the best. I mean, it's kind of the far end of arrogance, right? But as soon as you begin to understand we're not better than people, we can learn from everybody, you start to tweak your humility and put aside your narcissism. But great question. Thank you.
Thank you so much for enlightening us all with the great work that you've been doing. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I know that you are a very busy man. Is there any last words that you would like to share?
I want to express my gratitude to you and to all of you who participated. Thank you so much for trusting me in this session, hearing me. Please, if you're able to, jump to the website, scan that QR code, test out the survey. Vakis and I and the team are very excited to get your feedback on it. You'll get a little bit of sense to the attributes, and then you can also pre-order the book and also read the first chapter if you go to the website. So thank you so much. And Vakis, I'll look forward to talking to you here soon.
Thanks to everyone. We will be right back to hear from Michele Zanini, who's going to talk about how we can make organizations better and make sure that everyone feels engaged and valuable at work. See you in a bit.